Canada's lockdown plans and increased powers for the Australian military. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heise here, and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. Grab your stein of coffee and let's have a look at an apparent leak, or supposed leak, from one of the committees over in Trudeau's Parliament in Canada with their proposed plans for 2021. Now, we're not sure if this is correct. This may just be created to generate some links, some clicks. But considering the path the world has taken, considering the restrictions that are so easily placed on our freedom, considering the interventions that are being made all over the world, considering the public figures that are talking about a great reset, I think we need to be vigilant about everything that's supposedly leaked and not simply dismiss it. A year ago, if you had have said some of the things that happened in Australia this year, you would have been dismissed quite as a nutter. So maybe it's time we started at least giving some time to the nutters, because they may have some insight into really how bad things can get. We need to be vigilant, everyone. We need to realize the amount of power that we're giving over to our leaders and how easy it is for them to restrict our freedoms. Australia's been too complacent with just letting the politicians do their thing and the rest of us just getting on with flipping houses and living our lives. Some people have had a rude awakening into how much they can intervene. And the old saying of "that'll never happen in Australia, she'll be right, mate," that's a thing of the past. So let's have a look at this, everyone. Dear Removed, I want to provide you some very important information. I'm a committee member within the Liberal Party of Canada. I sit within several committee groups, but the information I'm providing is originating from the Strategic Planning Committee, which is steered by the PMO. I need to start off by saying that I'm not happy doing this, but I have to, as a Canadian, and more importantly as a parent who wants a better future not only for my children, but for other children as well. The other reason I'm doing this is because roughly 30% of the committee members are not pleased with the direction this will take Canada. Well, it just shows you. The problem with democracy is you only need one person more to push it through. It's mob rule, everyone. That's the danger of it. That's the danger of it. But our opinions have been ignored, and they plan to move forward towards their goals. They've also made it very clear that nothing will stop the planned outcomes. The roadmap and aim was set out by the PMO and is as follows. Phase in secondary lockdown restrictions on a rolling basis, starting with major metropolitan areas first and expanding outwards, expected by November 2020. Rush the acquisition of, or construction of, isolation facilities across every province and territory, expected by December 2020. We see New Zealand implementing similar restrictions. Daily new cases of COVID-19 will surge beyond capacity of testing, including increases in COVID-related deaths following the same growth curves, expected by the end of November 2020. Complete and total secondary lockdown, much stricter than the first and second rolling phase restrictions, expected by the end of December 2020 and early January 2021. Reform and expansion of the unemployment program to be transitioned into the Universal Basic Income program, expected by Q1 2021. Now, UBI is something we've discussed for a while now. I recently dragged up an old video I did about its rollout in Finland. Now, it didn't actually help people find work. It made them less stressed. How many people do you think would happily accept sacrificing their liberties for UBI and their debts written off? How many? Do you think they'd accept it here in Australia? I think sadly many would. They'd beg for it. Projected COVID-19 mutation and or co-infection with a secondary virus referred to as COVID-21, leading to a third wave with much higher mortality rates and higher rate of infection, expected by February 2021. Now, this was an issue that has been raised the illness is already mutating and evolving. That happens as part of nature. I mean, this could be a worst case scenario that we now, considering the lack of virility or the lack of mortality with the illness, it could be out of date. We don't know, even though it was sent on the 10th of October. Daily new cases of COVID-21, hospitalizations, and COVID-19 and 21 related deaths will exceed medical care facility capacity, expected Q1 and Q2 2021. Enhanced lockdown restrictions, referred to as the third lockdown, will be implemented. Full travel restrictions will be imposed, including inter-province and intercity, expected by Q2 2021. Transitioning of individuals into the Universal Basic Income Program, expected mid-Q2 2021. Projected supply chain breakdowns, inventory shortages, large economic instability, expected late Q2 2021. Deployment of military personnel into metropolitan areas, as well as all major roadways to establish travel checkpoints, restricted travel and movement, provide logistical support to the area, expected by Q3 2021. And there's a reason why I want to draw attention to some legislation that's going through Parliament right at the moment, increasing powers to our own military. Along with that provided roadmap, the Strategic Planning Committee was asked to design an effective way of transitioning Canadians to meet an unprecedented economic endeavour, one that would change the face of Canada and forever alter the lives of Canadians. What we were told was that in order to offset what was essentially an economic collapse on an international scale, that the federal government was going to offer Canadians a total debt relief. This is how it works. The federal government will offer to eliminate all personal debts, mortgages, loans, credit cards, which all funding will be provided to Canada by the IMF under what will become known as the World Debt Reset Program. In exchange for accepting this total debt forgiveness, the individual would forfeit ownership of any and all property and assets forever. I mean, this sounds utterly insane, doesn't it? But it's 2020, guys. It's 2020. I keep joking about Mortgage Keeper. Who would have thought? And I mean, this is Canada, so you know what Trudeau's like. The individual would also have to agree to partake in the COVID-19 and 21 vaccination schedule, which would provide the individual with unrestricted travel and unrestricted living, even under a full lockdown, through the use of photo identification, referred to as Canada's Health Pass. Committee members asked who would become the owner of the forfeited property and assets in this scenario, and what would happen to lenders or financial institutions. We were simply told the World Debt Reset Program would handle all of the details. Several committee members also questioned what would happen to individuals if they refused to participate in the World Debt Reset Program, or the Health Pass, or the vaccination schedule, and the answer we got was very troubling. Essentially, we were told it was our duty to make sure we came up with a plan to ensure that would never happen. We were told it was in the individual's best interest to participate. When several committee members pushed back relentlessly to get an answer, we were told that those who refused would first live under the lockdown restrictions indefinitely, and that over a short period of time, as more Canadians transitioned into the debt forgiveness program, the ones who refused to participate would be deemed a public safety risk and would be relocated into isolation facilities. I mean, this sounds ludicrous. But what has happened in history, everyone? Look at what's going on in the streets. Look at what's going on in public. Look at the animosity against people if you have particular opinions. Look at the cancel culture. Look at restrictions on people's ability to even spend on their credit cards, or open a bank account, or trade. Once in those facilities, they would be given two options: participate in the debt forgiveness program and be released, or stay indefinitely in the isolation facility under classification of a serious public health risk and have all their assets seized. So you can imagine, after hearing all of this, it turned into quite the heated discussion and escalated beyond anything I've ever witnessed before. In the end, it was implied by the PMO that the whole agenda would move forward no matter who agrees with it or not. That it won't just be Canada, but in fact all nations will have similar roadmaps and agendas. That we need to take advantage of these situations before us to promote change on a grander scale for the betterment of everyone. The members who were opposed and ones who brought up key issues would arise from such a thing were completely ignored. Our opinions and concerns were ignored. We were simply told to just do it. All I know is I don't like it, and I think it's going to place Canadians in a dark future. So, there we have it, everyone. This is from Canada. Now, there's some very drastic and quite confrontational and emotive claims here. Historically, nothing that's occurred or suggested here has not happened in the past. In many countries around the world, in many Western countries around the world. Internment camps, locking up people, restricting them, seizing their assets. Kind of aligns with the Great Reset we're hearing from Davos, doesn't it? That's publicly declared. I mean, you can look at all of this and think, oh, this is insane. It's never going to happen. Famous last words. So, let's look at another piece of legislation. So, the Defence Legislation Amendments Enhancement of Defence Force Response to Emergencies Bill 2020. So this is the summary. Amends the Defence Act 1903 to streamline the process for calling out members of the Australian Defence Force Reserves, including for the purpose of responding to natural disasters or emergencies, and provide ADF members, other defence personnel, and members of foreign forces with immunity from criminal or civil liability in certain cases when performing duties to support civil emergency and disaster preparedness, recovery and response. Okay, yeah, that's not terrifying. Not terrifying at all. What's concerning is all this stuff is just, maybe it could just be a coincidence that we're hearing these things about the Great Reset. We're hearing, there's apparent leaks coming from Canada about this dramatic plan. That we've got legislation like this coming through. Maybe that's all it is. Nonetheless, we should still be concerned about granting this level of power to our military in our own country. They're a defence force. They're not a police force. There's a big difference. So let's have a look. We can look at the... it's had the first reading. Oh, wait a minute. September. Yep, first reading, second reading moved. Second reading debated. Second reading, third reading agreed to. Well, there you go. And it's in the Senate. Happened in October this month. Now let's have a look at the explanatory memoranda. So we can see, maybe it's just nothing we need to worry about at all. This bill, the general outline, this bill includes several measures that will enhance Defence's capacity to provide assistance in relation to natural disasters and other emergencies. The mechanisms Defence uses for providing assistance in a natural disaster or other emergency, not requiring the use of force, is the Defence Assistance to the Civil Community Policy, DAC. The measures in the bill will enhance the ability to provide DAC assistance by streamlining the process for calling out members of the ADF reserves, providing ADF members, other defence personnel and members of foreign forces with similar immunities to state and territory emergency service personnel in certain cases when performing duties to support civil, emergency and disaster preparedness, recovery and response. Amend the ADF superannuation legislation to ensure that reserve members who provide continuous full-time service following a call-out under Section 28 of the Act are appropriately covered for superannuation and related benefits. So here, none of this sounds unreasonable. None of this sounds unreasonable. And I'm hoping it isn't. Schedule 1. calling out the reserves. The amendments in Schedule 1 will streamline and enhance the provisions enabling calling out of the reserves, reserve call-out, including where the reserve call-out is in response to a natural disaster or other emergency. In particular, the amendments will enhance the flexibility in how called-out ADF reserves members serve by removing references to continuous full-time service, enabling the Chief of the Defence Force to determine how and when they are required to serve. B. Simplify the process for advising the Governor-General before making a reserve call-out, providing for reserve call-out orders to be made by notifiable instrument, extending Parts 8, 9, and 10 of the Defence Reserves Services Protection Act to any service rendered by reserves under a reserve call-out order and not just continuous full-time service, modernize the language in Part 3 of the Act, amend the CDF's delegation power in relation to the reserve call-out to reflect the other changes of the Act. 3. The reserve call-out is a mechanism to require members of the ADF reserve forces to provide service even though they have not volunteered. Ordinarily, members of the reserves are required to render service at times they've agreed. Volunteer service, see Section 26 of the Act, or during specific training periods. This is in contrast to members of the permanent forces who have an ongoing obligation to provide continuous full-time service, meaning they can be required by command to perform duties at any time. So this allows them to call the reserves up as needed, it looks. That's a change. Use of the reserve call-out increases the size of the available force, such as when available full-time members or volunteers from the reserves are not sufficient. It is a mechanism that is used only in exceptional circumstances and can only be used in the circumstances outlined in subsection 28.3 of the Act. This includes circumstances involving civil aid, humanitarian aid, medical or civil emergency or disaster relief. It was used for the first time for this purpose during the 1920 bushfire disasters. In particular, a large-scale reserve call-out was conducted in January 2020 in response to the rapidly worsening situation. All other assistance provided by ADF members in response to natural disasters has been provided by full-time members or reserve members who had volunteered. Defence's experience during 2020 drew attention to ways in which the reserve call-out provisions could be improved. These changes will mean there is greater flexibility in implementing a reserve call-out and providing greater consistency in the treatment of reserve members providing assistance during a disaster, whether they have volunteered or been called out. So Section 6. Immunity. ADF members and other defense personnel and members of foreign forces performing activities in support of disaster preparedness, response or recovery are not afforded immunity from criminal or civil liabilities akin to those received by state, territory, emergency services personnel performing similar acts in good faith. This presents some legal risk to those individuals. The amendments in Section 2 insert a provision providing immunity in certain cases from civil and criminal liabilities for ADF members, other defense personnel, and members of foreign forces who, in the good faith performance of duties, provide assistance in preparedness for, response to, and recovery from a natural disaster or other emergency. The immunity provision is enlivened by a direction from the Minister that the ADF or the Department is to provide such assistance in circumstances where the relevant duties are being performed in relation to that assistance. The superannuation we'll skip by. The financial impact statement. This bill has no significant financial impact on the Commonwealth. And this is the statement of compatibility with human rights. Let's just jump to the conclusion here. The bill is compatible with human rights because it promotes and advances the right to just and favourable conditions of work and does not otherwise engage any human rights. And this is defence legislation amendments. Notes on the clause. Okay. And I'll let you go through these items in your own time. I'll link to that here, and you can go through more of the legislation. But so this looks like it's gotten through the readings of the Senate. So it looks like it went through real quick. What do you all think, everyone? It all sounds reasonable, doesn't it? But, there's a mechanism here to call up more people and increase the size of our military. Maybe it's just all a coincidence with everything else that's been going on. But it is concerning. And we need to be aware. This supposed leak could just be a bunch of, fear content to get the clicks. It could be completely unrealistic, and it could generate fear. Don't let this stuff affect you. Be stoic. Keep going. Keep living your life. Because one way or another, if they implement all of this rubbish, it's going to crumble eventually. It always does. It may not be in our time. It may not be in our children's time. It may be our children's children's time. But eventually, this type of rubbish always crumbles down. So there's hope in the future. What do you think, everyone? Do you think this is just, a legitimate risk? Or just working off all of the fears and the things that have been released right now and just the environment of the world and access to information? I'm hoping that's what it is. I really am. But I would not be surprised at all if things like this are being discussed around certain tables around the world. As always, let me know your thoughts, opinions in the comments down below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and want to support the content I create here, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or KuCoin. You can buy merch from Heise Says, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, and support us via PayPal. At least while we still have private property rights. Anyway, guys, have a great night. I'll see you all in the next episode.